Hi there, and welcome to the latest episode of Off the Data Provided. I am, of course, your host, Dr. Marcus C. Shepard. On today's episode, we are going to talk about cuffing season. We'll break down what exactly it is, how to approach this potential upcoming season for yourself in a more ethical and effective way, as well as some potential yellow/red flags to look out for while you are doing it. Of course, at the end, we will have an Ask Dr. Shepard, and if you want to send one, feel free to email me at offthedataprovided@gmail.com. Once again, that is offthedataprovided@gmail.com. So, delving into cuffing season, what exactly is it? So, we know that it gained its popularity well over a decade ago when Fabulous released a mixtape that featured the song Cuffing Season back in 2013, but it's literally been a term that's been buzzing around for ages even before then. Essentially, what cuffing season is it's a time where single people feel this urge to settle down somewhat temporarily with a partner during colder months. So usually with a drop in temperature, there is maybe a biological instinct or spark to find someone to cuddle up with until springtime. What we do know about the psychology behind cuffing season is that we might actually relate this to SAD, or AKA seasonal affect disorder. And this is where a lack of sunlight and shorter days usually lower your serotonin levels, and that might make you feel more down, tired, craving comfort, maybe even a little depressed. I know I first heard of seasonal affect disorder, or SAD, when I went to school in Evanston, right outside of Chicago, for undergrad. I had never heard of seasonal affect disorder, but it is real. I remember being on campus, and especially during those winter months, it can be very gray. You don't see the sunshine sometimes for days, and you can feel really down. So clearly, there is this shift psychologically and maybe even physically for a need to connect. So people have labeled these kind of short-term partnerships that oftentimes are exclusive but might not be exclusive as kind of, your cuffing season babe. So there's definite shift that we have observed that happens during these colder months. People tend to shift towards these short-term relationships or look maybe for deeper connections. Part of what, of course, drives this is a lack of social activity. So clearly, as this podcast is being recorded, it is April. I mean, not April. It is August. So I am jumping forward or jumping backward, right? But it is August, so it's still very warm out in most cities and places. There's a lot to do in the summer months. There's outdoor festivals, barbecues, beach trips, going to the lake, going to the park. I know in Philadelphia in particular, where I'm from, there's a lot of street festivals where they close down street festivals. There's SIPs, which is a weekly happy hour that happens throughout the city. So there's a lot to do. But when it gets colder, those opportunities to socialize kind of dry up a bit. There are fewer things to do, and so it leaves people looking for new ways to connect, to spend time together. And what better way than to spend a cozy night at home, potentially with someone you find attractive, right? So this time of year heightens the need for companionship. People are going to be more indoors due to lower temperatures. The desire for closeness, both physical and potentially emotional, grows as well. And this sets the recipe up to find someone to connect with for these months. So the typical cuffing season relationship usually starts in fall, usually mid to late fall or early winter, and continues through the colder months. But by the time spring approaches, usually this is when the relationships somewhat naturally dissolve, whether explicitly, you kind of talk about it's coming to an end, or people start to ghost or become more distant, and they hope you get the hint, which we, of course, know hopefully from this podcast by now is unethical, and we don't want to do that. So when I think about the timeline of cuffing season, we're kind of in that pre-cuffing season moment right now, I would argue. So usually what happens in terms of August, right? It is August, is that people start to maybe think about, oh, it's not as bright. The days aren't as long as they used to, right? The sunset is slowly but surely starting to set a little earlier and a little earlier each day. And so maybe unspokenly, you might be thinking about, oh, okay, I've had a good summer, still have a few weeks left of summer, but fall is coming. What do I want to do with fall? So thinking about that, you might enter this kind of pre-cuffing season era or phase. And this is where you realize that cozy nights are ahead, and you might start thinking about finding a partner to ride out those colder months with. So one might label this kind of the scouting area, where you look for partners, maybe primarily online, just browsing, maybe saving some people to connect with for later, or beginning a few minor connections, but not fully fleshing them out yet. You're in that early era, that scouting. I'd say about August 1st. So clearly it is August 5th right now. So we're in the early stages of scouting, and that probably lasts until maybe the end of August, maybe middle of September, September 15th. Then after that hits, you might either say it's tryouts or drafting. The words don't necessarily matter as much, but the goals that happen during these phases matter. So if you call it drafting, right, you pick your top candidates. This usually happens during the month of September, early October. This is where fall is clearly underway. Casual dating starts to pick up. You're testing for compatibility, seeing what fun dates you can plan, seeing if you guys kind of match one another's vibe. Then after that, as I said, it's either drafting or tryouts, however you want to flip it. And this is usually late October through early November. This is where cuffing season intensifies as you narrow down your options. So we've talked about before on this podcast, people typically have somewhat of a roster when they are casually dating, where you might be talking to 2, 3, 4. I had a good friend who had a roster of about 7 that he recently fully ended, and I shared on social media, got a little traction, that I helped him devise his message to those on his roster that he had selected someone and that he was no longer going to be available to engage with these people at all. And because he was upfront, ethical, and effective with communication throughout, the other people were aware that he was casually dating other people. And so when he sent the texts, he also sent me responses from some people, and everyone that he sent me took it very well because he had alerted them. So getting back to that roster, right? A lot of people have a roster that exists. Some people don't. They like to date casually, one person at a time. I've talked about pros and cons of doing both before, but just to give a brief summary of that as well here. The pros of dating casually, one person at a time, is you can really focus on someone. So you can figure out compatibility maybe quicker, and you can sit with your feelings about that person. The con, I guess, of dating one single person at a time is if that does end, then you need to spend some time building up to get to know somebody else to that degree and figuring that out. So it might take a little longer. then moving to having a roster. The pro is that you have a wealth of options that you're getting to know at different times. Usually when you have a roster, you have a few that are higher up on the roster that take priority, that you engage or like to talk with or go on dates more frequently than others, but you keep others around. The con with potential roster dating is you have so many choices that you might not make a choice, or it takes you way longer to make a choice because you're struggling between different individuals. So it really just depends on your dating style as well as what outcome you want to come. As I've talked about before, Janine, aka Dr. Anderson, we've talked about usually casual dating. We typically will casual date just one person at a time, and we do 30 days of intentionality where we focus on that person. And usually you don't even need 30 days, but within that 30 days, her and I have found that we are able to figure out if we really like this person or are interested in pursuing something more significant and meaningful, or if we're not interested at all. So that, of course, comes into play here with cuffing season, as oftentimes with cuffing season, as you're not looking for a long-term committed romantic partner, you're kind of looking for someone who understands there's an unspoken expiration date to your relationship, aka once spring and summer hits, the romance also might fade away. So you are going to maybe have a bit of a roster and you're whittling it down. And then after that kind of October, November, early November comes the actual cuffing. So that's mid-November to December. So this is official. You've just selected who you kind of want to wait out the colder months with. As the days get shorter, as winter approaches, as it gets darker earlier, relationships start to solidify. You get cozier and you're committed with your cuffing season partner. You probably start to build routines, things that you like to do. Do you guys cuddle on the couch and watch TV or binge watch movies? Are there certain days set aside each week that they come over or you come over? These are the things that are kind of figured out during that cuffing season early period. Then we might say after that comes kind of the holiday romance. So this is kind of December through January, maybe even February. So usually Thanksgiving, you're with your family, not necessarily your cuffing season boo, but you don't know. Maybe you are with them or you decide to bring them to Thanksgiving. And the holidays are where you maybe are a cuffed couple. So you enjoy romantic moments. You might hang out with friends, family. You're doing more than just being in the house. Then, of course, you somewhat plateau in about January or February, where you're still going strong, you're still enjoying each other, but you also know that things might be coming to an end soon. It's February, Valentine's Day hits. This is kind of the last surge of cuffing season. Some people decide to end their cuffing season either before Valentine's Day because they're not trying to make that commitment, where others might enjoy the company of their cuffing season boo. And so it's kind of that one last hurrah or celebration of what they enjoy. And then there is the post-breakup that's usually around Valentine's Day or post-Valentine's Day through about March, where, as we've said before, spring is here, the weather's warming up, there's more things to do outside, there's more connections that can be made, and therefore your romance fades away. Cuffing season, of course, is something that is more so in the Northeast, Midwest because of the harsh cold temperatures, but people follow it in other areas. When I lived in Los Angeles, people talked about cuffing season, and in LA, it doesn't really get that cold, but I guess it gets quote unquote colder for LA standards. So it is something that happens and is something that is more so in the lexicon, especially because of social media, where people will post or hashtag like cuffing season bae, or will post, I've seen the application, taking applications for my cuffing season boo or my cuddle buddy. I know the show Harlem, for instance, even did a bit of an episode that talked about kind of big boy season, where one of the characters was looking for her big boy to cuddle up with just for the winter months. And I remember a funny moment in the show for me was she found someone and the big guy was like, "You're not really interested in me for real. You just want to use me for my body heat." Right. And so some people are aware of what it is, and some people aren't. So we kind of went through a brief little overview of what cuffing season looks like or what it is for those who maybe are less familiar. But when we think about doing cuffing season, we need to approach it in hopefully an ethical and effective way. If we're ethical and effective with how we approach cuffing season, I think it can be a helpful place where you can explore your relationship desires and the things that you might enjoy doing with a long term partner. But I think on the flip side, it can be harmful or hinder people because you're going to get your feelings hurt if you start to feel this deep attachment that someone is not feeling for you. So we clearly want to make sure that we know what we are dealing with. Are we in a cuffing season situation or are we maybe in a situationship? And there is a difference between these two. I've seen some people kind of conflate them where they say cuffing season relationships are just situationships during the winter months. And I would push back on that a little bit because how I view and define them, there is some crossover in terms of that they both exist in gray areas and they're usually casual flings, but there are differences that exist. So cuffing season clearly is time bound. The relationship emerges in kind of early to late fall and exists through the winter months. And as the name suggests, there's somewhat of an unspoken expiration date, though, as I will harp multiple times, as I've already said, we want to be ethical and effective with our communication. So we want to be clear with the person that you are not expecting this to go past X date, that this is, you're going to enjoy each other's company. If things change or if different feelings emerge, let's have space to talk about that. But that the rule is not unspoken. That is a little too gray, I think, if we're trying to be more effective and ethical with our communication. Because as we know, we're humans. Sometimes our desires, our needs, our wants, our feelings change, and we should offer there to be space for that discussion to happen. It doesn't mean that you have to agree with that change, but you're opening up dialogue so that you and your potential cuffing season partner can understand where you both are, what you both are desiring / looking for, and if those things have changed. Maybe you were compatible and it made sense, but now someone else is catching stronger feelings and is looking maybe for a committed romantic relationship is not what you want. And so having that space to have that conversation, you can nip that in the bud. Maybe it is time to just call it. And maybe we're calling it in December because you have shared that you really are enjoying me. And I understand that, but that's not the space or place that I'm in. We also know that with cuffing season relationships, as I said, they're time bound. There's also seasonal influences where the holidays, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, Valentine's Day, that is kind of the impetus to have someone kind of around those holidays where sometimes people feel a little lonelier. And then the purpose, right? The purpose of the cuffing season is for comfort and closeness to compete against those winter blues, right? The seasonal affect disorder, that sadness, that lowering in your serotonin that makes you maybe feel more down, depressed, tired. So you're clearly desiring a physical and somewhat of an emotional connection. Even though the emotional connection is oftentimes secondary, that still does exist on those cold nights. Meanwhile, on the flip side, a situationship usually has no set timeline. So it is not time bound as cuffing season. Situationships can happen whenever. They can happen in the summer, spring, winter, fall, anytime, any place. They're also marked by ambiguity. So situationships are known because there's uncertainty in commitment. Usually both parties engage in interacting with each other with physical intimacy, but there's not defining the relationship at all. There are no clear expectations for the future. The ambiguity is what leads the relationship, and therefore there's oftentimes confusion that arrives, as well as mixed matched intentions and expectations. So someone might be just in it for the physical intimacy, and someone else might be in it for that as well, but they might catch feelings, but because it's ambiguous and they didn't define anything, they don't want to maybe talk about it, which leads to also the other difference in a situationship versus a cuffing season situation, or not situation, relationship. So the situationship, right, has a lack of definition. You're left undefined. There is no discussion of future plans, or exclusivity is avoided. Unlike the cuffing season boo or relationship, where intention is usually discussed or understood to be a specific period from that fall to winter months, situationships can drag on for years, months, without any progress. So we want to make sure that we understand the difference between those two, that you know, hopefully, that if you are looking for a cuffing season boo or versus situationship, that they're two different things. And that if you're not looking for a situationship, that you hopefully don't find yourself in a situationship when you thought it was a cuffing season boo. So to better understand or to avoid some of that, these are some red/yellow flags, I would say, to look out for when it comes to your cuffing season boo. So if you want to make sure that you're not falling into a situationship, you want to make sure that the person isn't avoiding conversations around the future. So if the person is evading these type of discussions or refuses to talk about future plans, it's a sign that they're maybe only interested in a temporary connection. And even though cuffing seasons are temporary by nature, you usually have plans, though. You have plans or weekly standing dates or bi-weekly standing dates that exist, or things that you do together. Those are future plans. So if the person is reluctant to engage in that type of conversation, it's probably leaning more towards a situationship and not a cuffing season boo. We also know that a reluctance to define what you're doing is going to be a yellowish flag, because clearly you're not trying to be in a committed romantic relationship, but people will say, oh, I'm not trying to label it, we're just having fun. These are their signals that they're unwilling to really flesh out what y'all are doing. And therefore, you're probably falling more towards a situationship and not a cuffing season boo. Because yes, you can still have fun. You still don't have to label it, but let's talk about it. What are we doing? Are you hooking up with other people? These shouldn't be conversations you're afraid to have with somebody. We also know that if the physical intimacy is well and ahead over the emotional connection, then this is probably a situationship and not a cuffing season boo or situation that you're in, because cuffing season, though physical intimacy is a priority, there is a emotional connection that is built in, because it isn't just hooking up. During the winter months, you oftentimes do some type of intimate, non-sexual things together, sometimes romantic. It slowly but surely builds out of that physical. But with a situationship, you're usually not doing that at all. We also know that inconsistent communication is probably a yellow to red flag on the play for your boo, your cuffing season boo, because even though you know that you aren't in a committed romantic relationship, you are building a form of an interpersonal relationship, and consistency is going to be important with that. Also, a limited social integration where they maybe avoid taking you out in public, seeing maybe their friends. I wouldn't necessarily say family because some people are particular about bringing people around their family because that might signal something more significant. But the fact that if you're only ever with them at their house, never out and about, never meeting a friend, because it is the winter months, usually people have game nights or movie nights. Okay, you might be more so a situationship. If there is no progress over time, then you're in a situationship because relationships evolve over months. And so if you are in a situationship, it usually doesn't evolve. You're kind of doing the same thing. You're just treading water. So those are a few red to yellow flags, as I've said, that one should look out for when it comes to the situationships. And the best way to have a healthy situation or healthy healthy cuffing season situation, right, or boo or relationship, however you want to label it, right? But cuffing season versus situationship is real, as we've highlighted. But the way to enjoy cuffing season boo is first and foremost to communicate clearly. Be upfront about what you want, what you're looking for, what you desire. Is this just something for the cold months? Is this something maybe for the cold months, but you're open to seeing if there's a connection that builds even further that you might take elsewhere? Or do you not know? Just be clear with the person to allow them to make the best informed decision for themselves. Oftentimes, people withhold this information because I really like you, or I find you really attractive, or I want to be with you. But you're ultimately harming the relationship or the potential relationship, whether it's just for the cuffing season or if it becomes more long term, because you're not honest about what you are looking for. So just be honest, because maybe the same person is down for that as well. Or maybe they're going to be honest with you and say, hey, I'm open to just doing things for a few months. And depending on what happens, we can see in spring. That's real. But if you're someone that actually really wants a long-term committed romantic relationship and you're not looking to be played around, then you might say, hey, okay, I'm going to be real with you. I like you too, but I'm looking for a committed romantic relationship. So I'm down to get to know you, but I'm going to be honest with you that I'll probably be dating other people. And if something gets more serious with someone, I'm probably going to take that chance. Now, you're being honest with that person as well. On the flip side, they can say, hey, sure, I'm fine with staying around, or, oh, no, I don't want that. As we know, sometimes people get very territorial with cuffing season or even sometimes situationships, which is another story for another day. But we want to make sure, first and foremost, that we communicate clearly. What exactly are we looking for? What are our goals? What are our expectations? Is this just for a finite period of time? Is it finite period of time, but open to seeing if it can go further? Is it just a finite period of time, but you ultimately desire something longer? What is it? Spell that out for people. We also, of course, want to set healthy boundaries. So we want to ensure that you and your potential cuffing season boo or bae are aligned when it comes to your emotional, physical, mental boundaries. Discuss what you're comfortable with. How frequently you want to see them. Is this just short term? Could it extend beyond winter? Let's set those boundaries. Also, take note of those red to yellow flags that we talked about before. Make sure you're aware. Are they reluctant to talk about the future? Are they reluctant to define what's happening? Is this overly physical and no real emotional? Inconsistent communication? Is there no progress over time? Is there limited social integration? What's going on? If you're aware of those, bring those up to the person when you see them. You also don't want to rush an emotional connection. I feel like sometimes people are guilty of this with cuffing season situations where they really push to get to the nitty-gritty or get to know someone, and you should allow that to flow naturally. But it should slowly but surely happen. If it's not happening at all, and you're treading water, this is maybe yellow flag. We should also be aware that seasonal affect disorder can trigger feelings of loneliness. People are driven to or seeking companionship, sometimes just out of convenience. So you want to recognize whether your desire for a cuffing season boo is based on actual interest or just because it's cold and they live close by and it's convenient. We do have to be honest with ourselves and also hopefully honest with the other person as well. Maybe this isn't someone you're actually be interested in a committed romantic relationship with, but they're close. They live around the block. They cook. They make good food. You like to go over to their place, eat well, have some fun, go home. That's fine. But we want to make sure that we're checking in with ourselves about the seasonal affect disorder and how that might play out. And of course, you want to, two more things is you want to check in regularly with your cuffing season boo to make sure you're on the same page. This will prevent, as we've said, assumptions. You don't want to make assumptions because you make a out of yourself. So we want to check those assumptions, keep them in line with open communication and dialogue, especially as the relationship starts to evolve over the seasons, as it potentially gets deeper during those holidays. But check with one another. And then last but not least is manage your expectations. So you want to approach cuffing season understanding that there's oftentimes an expiration date, but make sure that you discuss that explicitly. A lot of people don't like to do that because of feelings. They don't want to hurt the other person's feelings. They don't want to get their own feelings hurt. But when you are fully transparent and honest about what you desire, what you are looking for, what the expectations are, it can allow you to better align with the individual. And if we are checking in, as I said right before, we can see if those expectations are slowly shifting due to us maybe getting closer with our cuffing season romance, or quite honestly, on the flip side, maybe getting a little further apart. Maybe I really was feeling you, but something happened and I'm not feeling you as much. So let's check in so we can manage those expectations. And what I ultimately think at the end of the day, when it comes to these cuffing season relationships, they can be beneficial because they allow you to really practice a lot of interpersonal relationship maintenance and practice to help you for long-term committed romantic relationships. You can model behavior that you want. You can see things that maybe you don't want. You can test things out to see if they work well or not, with, of course, the caveat knowing that any type of interpersonal communication is conflict, content, and most importantly, communicator specific. So how you approach something with this one person might not work with you approaching it the same way with somebody else, but it allows you to get experience with dating in maybe a lower pressure situation because there is that looming expiration date. So that is our analysis of cuffing season. As I said, we're in the very, very, very early stages. We're in that scouting right now of cuffing season, right? The scouting is August, early September. The drafting or trials, however you want to define it, is September through early October, maybe mid-October. Then when you start going on these dates, it's kind of October into middle November. The preseason, you get more serious with one or two prospects, is definitely November. Then usually end of November around Thanksgiving or maybe early December is officially full-time cuffing season where you pick your best match and you enjoy them for the holidays from, December or Thanksgiving through maybe Valentine's Day. A lot of people talk about Valentine's Day being the quote unquote championship game if you are interested in transforming your cuffing season boo into a potential committed romantic relationship. But even before then, one might say the playoffs are surviving the holidays and considering long-term potential, which would be middle to late January through February 13th. As I've said before, a lot of people decide to end their cuffing season situations before Valentine's Day because that date represents something for some people. Other people don't want to be alone on Valentine's Day and decide to continue with it. But it's up to you. But hopefully you are setting your boundaries. You are being honest. You are being transparent. You are matching expectations with the other person through your communication. And if you ever feel like there are some yellow or red flags popping up, you're bringing that to the attention of the person you are talking to. So as I said, that is cuffing season in a nutshell. Now we will move on to the Ask Dr. Shepard for this week. As I've said before, if you feel like submitting an Ask Dr. Shepard, feel free to email me at offthedataprovided@gmail.com. Once again, that is offthedataprovided@gmail.com. So this week's Ask Dr. Shepard comes from one of my former students, and they were interested in my thoughts around the Ariana Grande situation that has been spurred by her latest music video, Pedal, and what I thought about the online communication and chatter around it. Oftentimes in my class, we will talk about pop culture and relate it to interpersonal communication. So I thought this was an interesting one that I could talk about pretty briefly, as I do have some thoughts on it as a fan of Miss Grande, or Grandy, as her last name is actually pronounced. So when it comes to the whole situation with Ariana Grande, I think one needs to take a step back and think about parasocial relationships, how we oftentimes feel ties or connections with individuals that we actually aren't in community with. And I think, unfortunately, that is what I am seeing with a lot of the discourse around what is occurring. When I think about our connections with celebrities, we oftentimes feel an immense connection due to the art that they share, due to the posts that they share. But we have to be honest with each other that that is only a sliver of who someone is, and quite frankly, could be a total persona who they actually aren't at all. So you have fallen deeply in like or love or friendship, oftentimes one-sided, right, with someone who is portraying something for you. So this concern that people are showing her and putting underneath a lot of her posts, I actually feel like is misplaced, because you are not in community with her. To be in community with someone, you have to be part of their circle, and they have to be accountable to you. Miss Grande is not accountable to any of us. She is an artist who releases her art, and those that enjoy it and love it will buy and support it, and those that don't won't, or will comment on it negatively, or will use it as a scapegoat to talk about other issues. But she is not an active community with any of us. She's in community with her family, with her friends who know the woman behind the persona who we have come to know. So I've found a lot of the discourse around it to actually be unproductive, because you do not actually know her, nor what she is or isn't going through. All you know is what she chooses to share. And as she has shared multiple times through interviews while promoting Wicked on her own social media platforms, and even in her music, her new album Pedal is out now, which I really enjoy. She talks about fame and her relationship with fame. It's not actually about a romantic relationship, as a lot of people believe it is. She's using the romantic aspect or lens as an allegory to talk about fame and its treatment to her, as well as her relationship to it. So if you actually want to know what she thinks or what she's dealing with, listen to the music. Go to her social media where she has talked about this stuff. Go to interviews where interviewers have asked her in kind and polite ways, and she has expounded upon it and said nobody should talk about anybody's bodies. I think this is the better place to start. Figure out, why do you feel this immense need to comment on someone else's body? As I've shared on my own social media, people comment on my own body somewhat frequently, especially on social media. It's probably several times a week. But even at the gym that I go to, every few months, someone will come up to me and talk to me about my body. And I've always found it odd, because I haven't asked anybody to comment on my body, nor am I sharing my body with any of these individuals who are commenting on it in a way that would warrant that. And I even shared more recently on social media that the one person that I do choose to share my body with in an intimate way actually never says anything about my body. So I think it's something that we need to wrestle with and think about. So that's kind of my thoughts on the situation. We are not in community with Miss Ariana Grande, and therefore we shouldn't be expressing these things publicly because I believe it causes more harm than it does with helping. If you want to help, you help people who you're in community with, but calling somebody out about something that you quite frankly have no idea what they're dealing with behind the scenes because you don't actually know who they are, to me is just fake moral flag fanning. As someone highlighted, people always like to talk about, oh, these girls, this isn't helpful for these girls. But what about the woman that you're attacking? Is this actually helpful for this woman? And it isn't. So that is what I think. As I always say, if you do feel like sending a question that's somewhat related to interpersonal communication, feel free to email me at offthedataprovided@gmail.com. And I will see you all on the next one. Bye.